Welcome back to Ryan Runs. I am Ryan Miller, and I didn't do one of these last week. I've been a little busy behind the scenes, behind all of the scenes, even if you listened to Book Club for Movies, which we did get an episode out this week on No Sudden Move, finally. But you might have heard us also talk about Patreons and whatnot. And that's because we are building a Patreon for Book Club for Movies, but I'm also building a Patreon for Ryan Runs. So that's been taking up some time. Also, I got hired out, so, I mean, those things are related in that the better the Patreons do, the more I can say no to people that aren't you, anybody listening to this. The answer is yes. But for that reason, I think it has provided us an opportunity to make a little bit more of this Ryan Runs thing, this weekly episode that I've been trying to do that, like I've already mentioned, isn't weekly enough. But I think originally, while I do take advantage of the opportunity to talk about games I've been playing, I also read some comics, and I also decorate garages. So I put up a picture, and I think what might be fun, we'll find out, is if each picture had a story. I don't think any of them are quite as good as this one, but that particular picture you might be looking at, and might even be blurry, maybe I've got a better one down in the corner, is a poster for the Bones Brigade movie, an autobiography, I think was the official subtitle there. And the beginnings of why that poster, why that movie means something to me is because skateboarding means something to me. I'm sure I've mentioned at some point that I grew up skateboarding. On days where I'm feeling particularly saucy, I say I was an amateur skateboarder because I had some competitions and some places and whatever, but I never had any sponsorships to speak of beyond some deals at the local shops and whatnot. So part of that is because I grew up skateboarding in Lompoc, California, which is kind of the cheapest place you can grow up on the coast of California. It's right smack dab in the Central Coast. But that also meant that I was within driving distance from Santa Barbara, San Luis, Pismo Beach, whatever. Santa Barbara being the operative location here because that's where Pal Peralta Skateboards was based. So I did have membership to the skate zone even. Boy, maybe if you're lucky, I'll put a picture of that down in the corner. In fact, it used to be that whenever we broke one of our Pal Peralta decks, which considering my only real good trick back then was olling very high, I broke a fair few amount. We would just take them back to Santa Barbara, to the factory, and they would hook us up with a new blem deck, we called them, or they called them, because they were blemished in some way. I think just the artwork, because they were just as good as the other ones that we broke. So why that becomes important later on is because continuing to grow up in that area, I guess was bound to happen that some of the friends in my circle ended up straight up working at Pal Peralta. So by the time that movie came out, which this is after, I mean, Stacy Peralta always did all of the Pal Peralta videos, whether it was Bones Brigade or whatever. He did all the skate videos. And if I had known back then, it would have been, I guess, no surprise in a way, because those always had a level of craft to them. Go look up Suburban Diners or something like that, and you'll kind of see what I'm saying. That's a later example. So I did have some friends that ended up working at Pal Peralta when this movie came out, so I got tickets to the premiere. So we went to the premiere, and I, besides coming away with a bunch of blurry photos of Lance Mountain and Tony Alva, we sat through one of my favorite movies. And yeah, the experience probably adds a lot, but also Stacy Peralta is just one of a kind dude as far as I'm concerned. His main pitch the whole night wasn't check out my movie, it was go make your own. So I haven't done that yet, but it was a fantastic night, and now I have a poster of it, which I didn't get. I'm bad at taking pictures, I'm bad at getting autographs. I think any of the times I've had the chances, I really just take it to talk to the person. So no autographs on that thing, it's just a poster that I picked up while I was there. So that'll be the first on the wall. We'll see which others follow. So if you haven't guessed by now, not having time to record one of these last week also means not having a lot of time to play a lot of video games. I am playing some, but I kind of see them in blocks. So I'm going to save those for the shows that are mostly about those game types or those groups of games. But what I have also been doing is reading some more comics. And some of these come from some of the research I've been doing for some of the book club for movie shows. We did a bunch, or I did a bunch. I read a bunch of Shang-Chi books before we talked about the movie and had a blast doing that. Just if you haven't listened to that episode, go check it out. I do spout off about comics probably way too much for that hour and 10-minute episode or something. But what happened while I was doing some of that reading is that I would then also go off on tangents. So there was a Shang-Chi appearance in some X-Men books in the 90s. And in there, Kingpin shows up for a second, and he references the Daredevil storyline Fall from Grace, which I've heard about several times over the years and never read. So I also downloaded those, and those don't currently have to do with anything that we're necessarily doing over there. So I'm going to talk about them over here. Because I had never heard of anybody involved. I do have a couple Daredevil books that I collected back in the day, but they were always when Ann Nocenti was at the book. And these books, I guess, it's the volume 1 run of Daredevil, so we're up to issue 319 at this point. And it's written by D.G. Chichester, which I have no experience with, and drawn by Scott McDaniel, who I also had no experience with. But I'll have to say is probably the reason I'm talking about this at all. Not that it's a bad story. It's almost ephemeral in a way, which when it comes to 90s comics, I'll take it. You know, a lot of times I feel like they're just not well written. And the plot isn't necessarily easy to follow. And you do get some kind of classically out of nowhere cameos, like Venom's in this, Deathlock is in this. John Kelly, who isn't Deathlock sometimes, but another Shield cyborg or something. I didn't go down too many rabbit holes when it came to this stuff, this storyline. So there is some of that in there, but it still has a feel about it and has a cohesiveness to it that is something I would say is worth reading, you know, even if it gets a little confusing here and there. But that is largely because of Scott McDaniel, who I didn't have any experience with his artwork. And it was worth it just for the art, maybe alone. But also you get that, I think, redesign of the Daredevil costume that I saw in one of the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games. You know, you could unlock a bunch of costumes, and most of the time I was like, I have no idea. But they were from different storylines for those characters. And one of the Daredevil costumes is one of the ones that shows up here. And it is also that kind of classic 90s over-designed. You know the way you drew like swords in elementary school? Some of the comic book character costumes from the 90s feel like that. Like you just never knew when to stop. Like here's another thing and a thing about it that does this. And I know that's not true. I would hope to some extent. I don't know. Sometimes maybe it is. Not that it even looks bad, really, this Daredevil costume, but there's just a lot to it. Whereas, you know, I feel like I lean towards the classic yellow or red, you know, first and foremost. So that was fun. Maybe check that out. The other thing I read came about from all the Loki reading that I did. And I'm actually bummed that I didn't make it all the way through this series because it actually has a story that's pretty related to the Loki TV show stuff. And it's Avengers Forever, which is older than I thought it was also. It came out in 1998, written by Kurt Busiek and Roger Stern, drawn by Carlos Pacheco and Jesus Marino, which Carlos Pacheco I do barely know because he drew some of the Captain America stuff that we talked about with the Falcon and Winter Soldier episode that we did when Falcon becomes the new Captain America. So Pacheco was there for that run. And does great work, like loved his stuff. But I wouldn't say that's the draw of Avengers Forever. While it does look great, I'm pretty into the story and I'm not finished with it yet. So it does have to do with Kang and Immortus. I could very much see some of it coming back with some of the MCU stuff that's coming up. But it's a solid story that I'm really interested in what's going to happen next. And let me see, the elevator pitch might be, it's Kang and Immortus, so you know it has to do with time travel to some extent, Immortus being the future version of Kang the Conqueror. And for some reason, a bunch of different Avengers from different time periods, past, present, and future, have been brought together to form a new Avengers, which I'm starting to get this feel now, especially after reading Secret Avengers, that Avengers are just, at no point during Secret Avengers does Captain America say, this is the Secret Avengers, but that's probably Brewbreaker. Although I don't think at any point in this storyline does anybody say, we're the Avengers Forever. So Avengers is just whenever a certain amount of team people that maybe were the Avengers at one point get together, and that's an Avengers. You got one. So this is one of those, and it's fun so far. So I would also recommend that. I think that's enough for a show. Again, come back next week where I will fully talk and pitch that Patreon, and I hope I can do something special. And also the next episode of Chasers will hopefully be, I'm going to say next week. There's a chance this week, Saturday, maybe. I have to do some on-site, or I guess location filming in Lompoc again. So it's going to take a little bit of extra time, but it's all coming. I'm all doing it. And if any of it sounds like it's worth it, then thank you. Forever.